What's up, everybody? Wanted to give some thoughts and takeaways on the U.S. women's national team becoming Concacaf champions yet again and clinching their spot for the Paris Olympics in 2024, and sort of overall just looking at this Concacaf W Championship and what it means in the context of next year's World Cup as this team continues to prepare for the world stage in these next 2 years. First World Cup, now we know they're going to the Olympics as well. And the first thing, before we get into some of the negatives and my concerns, we need to take a minute and recognize how valuable this tournament ended up being. You got 2 games through the group stage. Mexico was 0-2. And so you really had no clue what you were going to get in that final group stage game that was supposed to be the first real test. And then you were also relying on Canada to do their job to get to the final to provide that test. There was no guarantee the U.S. was going to get any kind of valuable data from this tournament heading into their final group stage game. Mexico absolutely showed up and played really well in that game, which gave the U.S. a great data point. You saw them struggle offensively, have to sort of scratch and claw to get the goal and ultimately the win. And then Canada did do their job, got to the final, which set up the game everybody wanted, the game this tournament deserved. The best 2 teams in CONCACAF going at it, the reigning world champions, reigning gold medalists. And so you got another really good test for the U.S. there. And this is particularly important because of the players who featured so prominently in this tournament. You can go down the list from Sophia Smith to Alana Cook, Sofia Huerta, Emily Fox, players who are going to be massive parts of the World Cup team, who had not been in this kind of environment before, who had not done a month-long tournament with a national team, who had not played the gold medalists with a spot at the Olympics on the line. And Vlatko Andonovski even talked about this after the game. He said, I've been consistent before and after the game that I don't even view this as a sort of revenge for the Olympics because our roster is so different. Some of these players just can't really appreciate that because they weren't part of that team that lost to Canada in the Olympics. That's how different this team looks. And the one thing you don't want is players figuring out how to win ugly and how to win multiple ways and sort of how to problem solve and experience the stuff the U.S. is going to experience in a World Cup at the World Cup for the first time. You saw what teams that are actually capable of playing fundamentally sound defense and being hard to break down look like. You've seen how much you have to put in to actually get that goal, both against Mexico and against Canada. So now you know what that feels like, what to expect to a certain extent. Of course, you can't replicate it. But that was a thought that had crossed my mind once Mexico was really struggling at the beginning of this tournament is Canada better get to the final or else I'm not sure we're going to have anything valuable to take away from the U.S. moving forward. It turns out they got 2 incredibly valuable games, and so now this next generation of players who are also part of this now, maybe not all of them, but the players I just listed, you absolutely have to think are all going to play at least a role, if not a major one, in the World Cup next summer. So now they have a taste of what this feels like. This is your one and only chance to replicate it. The U.S. took full advantage. It wasn't pretty, and I would argue that's a good thing. We need to get out of this mindset of they should destroy everybody, because that's not the world we're living in anymore. Canada is right there, as are plenty of European teams. But you look at how the recent games between these teams, they look like that. It's small margins, one play deciding things. 2 areas of concern and sort of big takeaways for this tournament for me. 1, that final third has got to be better. You saw it time and time again. It rang true against Canada as well. This was not a issue of opportunity and, chance creation. Sophia Smith wasted a couple really good looks. You can go down the list. There were 3 or 4 that you could argue all should have been in the back of the net. Of course, you're not going to finish every really good look you get. But it took the penalty for the U.S. to score. They should have had at least 1 goal before that. And this is a great example of what the formula is to beat this team. And I keep coming back to this. You can't play with them for 45, 60, 90 minutes. Canada had a really good first 10, 15 minutes. And after that, it was all U.S. They basically fixed the Nichelle Prince problem, gave Sofia Huerta some help. And I think her third shot came in the 17th minute, and they didn't have another one until the 69th or something like that. U.S. just dominated this game. And that's, again, an excellent Canada team. Maybe there's a team or 2 or 3 out there who, on their best day, can actually play with the U.S. for a full 90. But I'm still not convinced anybody can. What teams like Canada can do, because they're on a similar level talent-wise, is they can sit in, they can be hard to break down, and they can capitalize on their opportunities and limit the U.S. to those 2 or 3 really good looks and hope they don't convert. When this team comes up short, the story is almost always they just didn't take their chances. And you can call it unlucky, but it's becoming a pattern. And that's where we need to shift that conversation from, and this is just my general soccer philosophy, sometimes it is unlucky. And sometimes it's because you're a team that is not finishing well and not executing in the final third. And right now, the U.S. is a team that's not executing in the final third. Now, plenty of time to address that before you get to the World Cup. But that is my biggest single concern. When it's 3 chances and not 10, when you're playing the better teams in the world that aren't going to get, run over, and they can score on you and actually create some chances. You saw Canada do it. You saw Mexico do it to a certain extent. Whereas some of these other teams just couldn't get near the U.S. goal at all. That is a formula for things going poorly. If they don't get that penalty, Canada has some good looks in stoppage time to win that game. And it's the same story over and over again. If it's not that the U.S. played poorly, it's just they didn't take their chances. So that is my single biggest concern. Maybe it was just a thing in this tournament, but the front three was in such good form coming in, which is also part of what makes this so strange. And from an NWSL standpoint, and it just didn't really seem to click. And Alex Morgan scored in the opener, and then got the PK, but was not consistently contributing goals through this tournament. Sophia Smith had plenty of chances that went to waste. Malpew had a couple really big misses as well. The chances are going to be there every single game. That was reinforced by what they were able to do against Canada, who is as good as defensively as just about any team in the world. Nobody is going to stop them from getting chances. The question is, can they actually take them? And that is going to determine how they fare against the best teams in the world in these next 2 major tournaments, World Cup and the Olympics. The other thing I wanted to highlight that to me is not getting discussed enough is how important Julie Ertz is to this team. Now, of course, she is out because of maternity leave at this moment. But Andy Sullivan did not have a great tournament, and specifically from a distribution and tempo setting standpoint. Everybody around her, Lavelle, Horan, and all 4 defenders in the final completed more passes than she did. When you are the link between the defense and the attack, that should not be happening. And it's not necessarily Andy Sullivan's strength, but that has to be part of what the number 6 does in this system. And I say that because Rose Lavelle and Lizzie Horan are so good going forward. And what you saw in this game, in particular, was them having to drop deeper and sort of help with the buildup, which then takes them out of being able to support the front three, which leaves the front three isolated, and all of a sudden they're not connecting as many passes as Canada's front three did, despite dominating. The U.S. didn't dominate possession, but dominating the overall play and the quality of chances, and yet Canada's front three connected more passes. That is a result of what is happening at the back of that midfield. Could have just been a poor tournament from Andy Sullivan. But again, as I pointed out before, this is a responsibility she's never had before, to be the starting number 6 for this team in this tournament. And yeah, Christy Muir scored a couple goals. Maybe that's part of this, is she ends up being part of that solution, but it's not exactly her game either. There's a reason Julie Ertz started the 2019 World Cup final and started the semifinals in the Olympics when they lost to Canada. That midfield three is pretty much set, and they work really well together because Julie Ertz does all of that stuff that needs to happen for Lindsey Horan and Rose Lavelle to thrive. To me, it is not a coincidence that those two players in particular didn't have great tournaments. To me, it's not about them. It's about their role and what they had to do to sort of make this work because Julie Ertz wasn't there. So you fully expect Julie Ertz is going to get a starting job back. But the question is, if Julie Ertz is unavailable for whatever reason, what is plan B in that midfield? And is it this moving forward? And if so, what is Vlatko Andonovski going to do to fix this? Because that was another glaring weakness. And the other one, just defensively, Sofia Huerta really struggled one-on-one at the beginning of the game. And we'll see what the right back position looks like moving forward. And Vlatko Andonovski was talking about, we sort of had to make these calculated decisions based on how much do we want to sacrifice offensively for defense and vice versa. They ultimately solved the problem, and after the first 20 minutes of the game, it was fine. But you're looking at this group of players who started these two major finals recently, World Cup and then the Olympic semifinal. World Cup final, Olympic semifinal. It's not a coincidence that two of them were Kelly O'Hara and Julie Ertz. And those two spots, if I had to highlight some things that did not go well for the U.S. in this game against Canada, which overall I thought they played quite well. Again, just didn't take their chances. But from an overall performance, it was very good. The two spots that gave me the most concern, right back, holding midfielder. And again, Sofia Huerta is just at the beginning of her national team career. This isn't some sort of grand proclamation about her future with this team. And she showed you what she gives you going forward with that incredible cross she played into Sophia Smith, who let the opportunity go to waste. But that is something I am watching, sort of those two spots, and particularly the backup number 6, because I think Ertz is going to get that back, as I said before. But those two spots moving forward are question marks for me as Vlatko Andonovski is building this roster for the World Cup. So those are the three things I really wanted to highlight coming out of this game. We need to celebrate how valuable this was and the fact that this team found ways to get it done, even when it wasn't going perfectly, and even when they couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. There are some questions positionally and depth-wise and roster-wise about what happens sort of if you don't have exactly what you want, and what does the right back position look like moving forward. And the final third has to improve. That is, to me, you ask me what this team's downfall would be if they lose. Why? It's because they didn't take their chances. They have no problem creating them. They show that again against Canada. And it still took that penalty at the end of the game for them to actually get the decisive goal and become champions of Concacaf. That's all we got for this recap video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and get all of the Touchline Talk video content coming right to you. Also check out everything I'm doing on Substack, touchlinetalk.substack.com, and we'll see you next time.